The lights were blinding, the cameras relentless, and the air thick with the kind of tension that only comes when millions are watching live. On stage, two men stood separated by ideology, history, and temperament. Donald Trump leaned into his microphone, lips curling into the kind of smirk that told the audience he wasn't about to talk policy, he was about to go for the jugular. And then, with that trademark sneer, he delivered it, the insult. Not about healthcare, not about taxes, but about Barack Obama's marriage. A cheap, cutting jab meant to wound not just the man standing across from him, but the very bond that defined Obama's public and private life. For a split second, it was as if the world stopped breathing. The audience froze in stunned silence. The moderators looked down nervously at their notes, unsure whether to intervene. In the front rows, jaws fell open. A cameraman instinctively zoomed in on Michelle, her calm expression betraying only the faintest flicker of disbelief. The line reverberated through the hall like a shockwave, cruel, unnecessary, dripping with arrogance. Some in the crowd let out audible gasps, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few of Trump's supporters even laughed, clapping as if the attack was sport. But for many, the moment felt like a violation, a line that had been crossed, not in politics, but in humanity. To insult a man's marriage, to mock the foundation of his dignity, on live television, it was more than outrageous. It was un-American. Obama didn't flinch. He didn't roll his eyes, didn't fire back with an immediate quip. Instead, he remained perfectly still, his gaze locked on Trump. There was a weight in that silence, a gravity that even Trump seemed to notice as his smirk faltered for just a heartbeat. The crowd leaned in, sensing something about to happen, something they had never seen before. The cameras cut to the audience, wide eyes, hushed whispers, a nation collectively holding its breath. On social media, timelines lit up instantly. Did he just say that? Did Trump really go there? The moment was already viral, already historic, already dangerous. And yet, the real story hadn't even begun. Because what Barack Obama said next turned the entire stage upside down. To understand why that single insult landed like a thunderclap, you have to remember the history simmering beneath it. This wasn't just two politicians sparring on stage. This was the culmination of years of hostility, of one man's obsession with tearing another down. Trump had always circled Obama like a shadow, his name entwined with the president's in ways that seemed less about politics and more about envy, resentment, and spectacle. It began with the birtherism saga, the conspiracy theory Trump nurtured like a badge of honor. He made it his mission to delegitimize Obama, not through policy disagreements, but through identity itself. He questioned Obama's birthplace, his right to the presidency, his very Americanness. Night after night, talk shows replayed Trump's taunts, amplifying them until millions were whispering doubts. For Obama, a man who had already carried the weight of proving himself in a country still wrestling with race, those attacks weren't just smears. They were an assault on his story, his family, and the truth of who he was. So when Trump, years later, chose to drag Obama's marriage into the mud, it struck with an even deeper cruelty. This wasn't random. It was a pattern, a playbook, of degradation designed to strip Obama of the very things that made him human, dignified, relatable. To target the love story that had anchored his rise, the partnership with Michelle that inspired millions, was to poke at the last sacred line. Because, for so many Americans, Obama and Michelle weren't just a political couple. They were a symbol, a vision of what stability, loyalty, and partnership looked like in a public life, often marred by scandal. They represented the possibility of grace under pressure, of love surviving the storm. Trump's insult wasn't just about Barack. It was about trying to taint that symbol, to make ugliness out of something millions held up as aspirational. And that's why the room reacted the way it did. It wasn't merely shock at a harsh line. It was recognition that something larger had been violated. Insulting a marriage on live television wasn't only a jab at one man. It was a signal of disdain for the values millions cherished: respect for family, reverence for love, belief that private dignity should be off-limits in the public arena. For immigrants who had built their lives on family bonds, for progressives who saw the Obamas as a beacon of inclusion, for young people who believed in the power of representation, the insult was personal. It said, even the purest parts of your life, your home, your love, can be weaponized if someone arrogant enough decides to do so. That's why Obama's silence in that moment carried such electricity. Everyone knew he was calculating, waiting, deciding how to respond. And unlike Trump, Obama's responses weren't born of impulse. They were crafted with precision, with intent. He wasn't just going to defend his marriage. He was about to turn the insult into a lesson. But first, the audience had to sit in the weight of it. They had to feel the sting, to understand that this wasn't an ordinary insult, but part of a long war waged on Obama's legitimacy, his identity, and now his family. That's what made the stakes skyrocket. This wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about principle. And yet, the moment still carried echoes of their old feud, the ghosts of battles fought years before. Because this wasn't the first time Trump crossed the line, and Obama never forgot. Arrogance had always been Donald Trump's calling card, long before the bright lights of that debate stage, before the insult that left the room stunned. Trump had mastered the art of spectacle. To him, power wasn't about service. It was about domination. It was about making others feel small so that he could appear larger. Every insult, every boast, every carefully staged feud was a performance, a way to keep himself at the center of attention, no matter the cost. From the moment he descended the golden escalator to announce his presidential run, Trump reveled in the role of provocateur. He didn't craft policies with precision. He crafted sound bites designed to sting. Rivals weren't political opponents to be debated. They were targets to be humiliated. Nicknames dripped with mockery, speeches peppered with exaggerations and taunts. Crowds roared not for vision, but for derision. He gave them the theater they craved, and in return, they gave him loyalty. But arrogance has a way of blinding a man. Beneath the bluster was fragility, an ego so brittle it required constant reinforcement. For every insult hurled at others, Trump demanded applause for himself. For every jab he threw, he demanded devotion in return. Critics saw the contradictions clearly. The man who mocked others for weakness yet seethed at the smallest slight. The man who preached strength but surrounded himself with sycophants afraid to tell him the truth. And time and again, that arrogance led to scandal. From failed business ventures that he spun into myths of genius, to controversies that would have sunk lesser men, Trump thrived on chaos. Bankruptcy, recast as strategy, lawsuits, painted as badges of honor. Each failure was repackaged into bravado, a refusal to admit defeat. To him, truth was flexible, reality negotiable, as long as the story kept him in the spotlight. This same obsession with spectacle fueled his fixation on humiliating Barack Obama. It wasn't enough to disagree with Obama's policies. Trump wanted to strip away the dignity that made Obama respected, to drag him down into the mud of insults and conspiracy theories. Birtherism became his weapon of choice, a campaign built on lies that questioned not just Obama's presidency, but his very identity as an American. The more outrageous the claim, the louder the cameras clicked, and Trump basked in it. Even when Obama dismissed the attacks with calm disdain, Trump kept pushing, hungry for validation. He seemed to believe that if he could land the blow that rattled Obama, he could prove himself superior. It was a contest of ego, not ideology, and Trump was desperate to win. His rallies turned into arenas of mockery, his interviews into stages for provocation. Each time he pushed further, convinced that shock itself was power. But arrogance has consequences. The same arrogance that drew crowds also left him vulnerable. Scandals piled up, stories of mistreatment, crude remarks caught on tape, reckless decisions that embarrassed allies and inflamed enemies. Time and again, Trump brushed them aside, insisting he was untouchable, insisting he was winning even when the evidence said otherwise. To him, humility was weakness, accountability a trap. His entire persona depended on projecting strength, even if it was built on sand. That night on stage, the insult toward Obama's marriage wasn't an accident. It was the culmination of years of reckless arrogance. Trump believed he could say anything, cross any line, and walk away unscathed. He had done it before, after all. Every time the world gasped, every time commentators predicted his downfall, he seemed to emerge louder, brasher, more defiant. In his mind, he was invincible. But arrogance is often blind to timing. What Trump didn't realize was that this time, the stage was different. This time, the line he crossed wasn't just political. It was personal. universal, deeply human. To mock a man's marriage, to sneer at the very foundation of love and partnership, was to step into territory where even his supporters shifted uncomfortably. And as Trump basked in his own words, as he smirked at the reaction he had provoked, he missed the shift happening in the room. The crowd's silence was no longer awe, it was anticipation. They weren't waiting for his next line. They were waiting for Obama's. Because arrogance can make a man overconfident. It can make him forget that every performance has a counterpoint, every act of hubris a reckoning. Trump believed he had landed the ultimate blow. He thought he had cornered. Obama humiliated him on the grandest stage of all. Yet, for all his bravado, Trump never expected Obama to strike back in front of millions. Barack Obama's story had never been one of shortcuts or spectacle. Unlike the gilded towers of Manhattan where Trump built his name, Obama's beginnings were marked by complexity, struggle, and the quiet determination of someone who knew that dignity was not given, it had to be earned. Born to a Kenyan father and an American mother, he grew up navigating a world that often tried to reduce him to labels. He was too black for some, too white for others, and for many, simply different. In the America of his youth, difference was a heavy burden. He carried questions about identity, about belonging, about where he fit in a society still fractured by race and history. Yet rather than letting that fracture define him, Obama turned it into a lesson. He understood early that dignity came not from how others labeled you, but from how you carried yourself in the face of those labels. That understanding shaped his journey. After college, instead of chasing wealth or prestige, he chose the South side of Chicago, working as a community organizer in neighborhoods long abandoned by politicians and forgotten by power. He sat in church basements, listening to families whose lives were marked by layoffs and poverty. He helped build coalitions, not for glory, but to fight for jobs, schools, and basic respect. Those years didn't bring applause or headlines. They brought patience, humility, and resilience. They taught him that leadership wasn't about volume or bravado. It was about listening, about standing with others when no one else would. And then came Michelle. Their love story wasn't scripted for tabloids or crafted for cameras. It was real, grounded, and tested by the weight of ordinary life. They met as colleagues, equals, partners in intellect and spirit. From their very first conversations, Obama spoke less about ambition and more about purpose, about using his talents for service rather than self. Michelle saw not a politician, but a man whose calm steadiness mirrored her own discipline, whose humor and grace reminded her of the values she was raised with. Together, they built a marriage that was both private and public, intimate yet symbolic. For millions, the Obamas represented what so many longed to see in politics. A family untouched by scandal, a couple who embraced each other with genuine affection even under the harshest glare of the spotlight. Their marriage was not an ornament, it was an anchor. Through campaigns, attacks, and the ceaseless scrutiny of the presidency, it was their bond that steadied them. That bond became part of Obama's political identity. He never hesitated to speak of Michelle's influence, to credit her as his rock, to show that love was not weakness, but strength. In a world where leaders often treated their families as props, Obama treated his as partners. The image of him, stealing a quick glance at Michelle during speeches, of holding her hand as they walked through crowds, resonated deeply. It wasn't about romance alone. It was about dignity. It was proof that power could coexist with tenderness, that leadership could stand alongside humility. This contrast with Trump could not have been sharper. Where Trump flaunted wealth, Obama embraced humility. Where Trump demanded loyalty through fear, Obama inspired it through respect. Where Trump's relationships seemed transactional, Obama's marriage stood as testimony to something deeper: commitment, respect, equality. For immigrants watching from across the globe, the Obamas embodied a dream that family, integrity, and love could triumph even under the hardest trials. For young Americans of color, they represented possibility, the idea that dignity could rise above prejudice. For progressives, they became a mirror of their values: inclusivity, compassion, partnership. And yet this dignity was not fragile. It had been tested repeatedly, through attacks on Obama's faith, his birthplace, his right to belong. Each time, he responded not with rage, but with calm precision. He understood that his every word carried weight, that anger could be twisted into a weapon against him. So he chose composure. He chose patience. He chose to let dignity be his shield. This is why the insult Trump hurled on that stage was more than a line. It wasn't simply an attempt to embarrass a political opponent. It was an attack on the very foundation of Obama's strength. By mocking his marriage, Trump wasn't just targeting Barack Obama, the politician. He was targeting Barack and Michelle Obama, the couple who had come to symbolize stability and grace in an era of division. And for Obama, that was the one line that could not be ignored. Because Michelle wasn't just his wife, she was his partner, his equal, the mother of his children, the soul of his story. To disrespect her was to disrespect everything he had built, everything they had endured together, everything they stood for. The audience that night may not have known all the details of Obama's past, the community meetings in church basements, or the lonely struggles of a young man searching for identity, but they knew enough. They knew that his calmness was earned, his dignity forged in fire, his marriage a testament to values stronger than insults. And when Trump targeted Michelle, he unknowingly lit the fuse to Obama's most unforgettable counterattack. The room was still humming from the shock of Trump's first jab, but instead of pulling back, he pressed forward. He could feel the attention on him, the cameras lingering, the crowd waiting to see if he would double down, and Trump never missed a chance to double down. He leaned forward, his voice rising just enough to carry over the uneasy silence, repeating his insult with exaggerated emphasis, twisting it into a cruel joke. His hands cut through the air in sharp gestures, the smirk on his face widening as a few chuckles rippled from scattered supporters in the audience. It wasn't enough for him to wound once. He needed to grind the blade, to bask in the outrage he had unleashed. The moderators shifted uncomfortably, trying to maintain composure. One cleared his throat, ready to steer the debate back to safer ground, but Trump waved a hand dismissively, launching into another taunt. He was no longer talking about policy, no longer talking about the country. He was circling back again and again to the insult, savoring it as if the repetition itself would make it stick. Gasps turned to murmurs. In the crowd, a woman shook, her head in disbelief, whispering to the man next to her. A young student near the back clutched her phone, already typing furiously, live tweeting the exchange. He's going after Obama's marriage again. Can you believe this? On the stage, Obama did not move. He stood tall, his posture steady, his face unreadable. He didn't interrupt, didn't roll his eyes, didn't allow the weight of the insult to provoke even the slightest twitch of anger. His stillness only made the contrast sharper. As Trump ranted, Obama's silence filled the room like a growing shadow. Trump mistook it for weakness. He mistook composure for hesitation, stillness for surrender. Smirking again, he raised his eyebrows and jabbed the air with a finger as though he'd already won the exchange. The audience, however, was beginning to sense something different. They leaned in, watching Obama more than Trump now, their eyes searching for a signal, a flicker, a hint of what was coming. And it was in those moments that the tension became unbearable. Every insult Trump added was like a drumbeat, louder and more chaotic, but the anticipation belonged to Obama. The silence was no longer awkward. It was loaded, electric, coiled like a spring. Trump, still reveling, chuckled at his own words, shaking his head as though the debate had turned into his private comedy show. But the laughter didn't spread. The audience wasn't laughing with him anymore. They were waiting, holding their breath, drawn to the quiet figure who had yet to speak. For years, Obama's critics had underestimated his timing. They expected heat, and instead, he gave them patience. They expected fluster, and he gave them calm. Tonight was no different. He knew the power of waiting, of letting an opponent overextend themselves until the weight of their own arrogance became unbearable, and Trump, oblivious, was doing exactly that, digging himself deeper with every word. The cameras captured it all, Trump's animated gestures, his confident sneer, and beside him, Obama's unshaken stillness. Commentators watching live scrambled to keep up, whispering into microphones that the exchange had veered off the rails, that Trump had broken unwritten rules of decency, that Obama's response, whatever it would be, could define the night. In the crowd, you could feel the energy shift. The gasps were gone. The murmurs had faded. What replaced them was silence. Pure, Expectant silence, a silence so heavy that even Trump seemed to sense it, pausing mid-sentence, as if suddenly aware that he was no longer in control of the room. Obama's eyes flicked toward him, steady, piercing, calm. It wasn't anger that Trump saw. It was something sharper, something far more dangerous. And then, slowly, deliberately, Obama leaned into the microphone, and the entire arena braced itself. The silence was suffocating. Millions watching at home leaned forward. The audience inside the hall sat frozen, their eyes glued to the man who hadn't flinched once, the man who had weathered the insult and let the moment ripen. And now, as Barack Obama leaned toward the microphone, the entire atmosphere shifted. His voice came out steady, measured, calm. "You know, Donald," he began, pausing just long enough to let the crowd's tension thrum. "For a man who talks so much about winning, you sure spend a lot of time worrying about my marriage." Laughter rippled through the hall, quick and sharp, cutting into Trump's smirk. Obama's tone wasn't angry. It was amused, as though he were brushing off a petty heckler rather than a man trying to score points on live television. The audience roared louder, emboldened by his composure, their laughter swelling into applause. Obama let it ride for a moment, his lips curling into the faintest smile before he continued. "Now, Michelle and I, we've been through a lot together. We've raised 2 amazing daughters. We've endured the constant noise, the constant scrutiny, the endless headlines. And somehow, we're still here, stronger than ever. Because real strength doesn't come from how loud you shout or how many insults you can sling. Real strength comes from love, from respect, from partnership." The applause thundered, this time standing applause from pockets of the audience. Trump shifted, his smile wobbling, his arms folding across his chest like a shield. "And Donald," Obama pressed on, his tone tightening ever so slightly, "I know that may be a little foreign to you. Respect, partnership, loyalty. See, those aren't transactions. They're commitments. Commitments that last longer than a news cycle, longer than a headline. Commitments that hold steady even when the spotlight fades." Gasps, then cheers. The weight of the line sank into the room, hitting with a moral gravity that Trump could not match. Obama's voice sharpened now, his cadence deliberate. Because let's be honest, if you can't even respect your own commitments, if you can't honor the people closest to you, how can anyone believe you'll honor the commitments you make to this country? The crowd erupted. The blow was clean, surgical, delivered with the calm precision of a man who had spent years letting Trump underestimate him. Trump shifted again, blinking rapidly, his mouth tightening as he reached for the microphone. But Obama wasn't finished. "No, no," Obama said, holding up a hand with that professor's patience he had perfected over decades. "You had your turn. You've been throwing around lies about me for years. My birth certificate, my faith, my very existence in this country. You built your name, your platform, on trying to tear me down. And tonight you tried to drag my marriage into it." He shook his head slightly, voice lowering into something steady, personal. "But here's the truth you keep running from. Every insult you throw only says more about you than it ever could about me." A long pause. The audience sat silent for just a heartbeat before exploding again, applause ricocheting off the walls. The cameras caught Trump's face, red, stiff, lips pressed into a thin line. Obama wasn't smiling now. His voice carried the weight of something larger than the exchange. "You see, I don't need to prove my love for my wife to you. I don't need to prove my dignity to you. Because Michelle and I, we've lived it. We've built it. And millions of Americans have seen it for themselves. They know it's real. They know it's unshakable." Then, just as the applause began to crest, he shifted gears again, bringing humor back into the fold. "Now, Donald, if you'd like to talk about marriages, well, let's just say you don't exactly have the best track record." The room exploded, laughter like thunder, clapping like a storm. Trump's face twisted, his jaw tightening as his eyes darted toward the moderators, silently begging for rescue, but none came. The audience had turned. Obama let the laughter wash over him, waiting, always waiting, before delivering the next strike. "But here's the difference between you and me. You see marriage as a brand, as something to be shown off when it's convenient and discarded when it's not. I see marriage as a promise I intend to keep, a promise that defines me, grounds me, strengthens me. And when you mock that, you didn't just mock me. You mocked every family who's ever held on through hardship, every couple who's ever built something together out of love, every immigrant who sacrificed for their spouse, every soldier who kissed their partner goodbye before serving this country. You mocked them all. The crowd was on its feet now, clapping, cheering, some even shouting in affirmation. Obama's voice cut through it all, rising with conviction. And that, Donald, that's why you'll never win. Because you don't understand what real strength looks like. You think it's about insults. I know it's about integrity. You think it's about arrogance. I know it's about dignity. You think it's about tearing people down. I know it's about lifting them up. Trump's composure was gone. He shifted uncomfortably, his lips moving as though searching for a rebuttal that never came. The camera zoomed in on his hands, clenched tightly against the podium. Obama leaned forward one last time, his voice steady, calm, devastating. You insulted my marriage tonight, but what you really revealed was your weakness. And I'll tell you this, a man who doesn't respect his own word, who doesn't respect his own commitments, who doesn't respect the love that holds families together, that man will never ever respect America. The arena shook with applause. It was no longer just a reaction. It was a release, a catharsis. The audience exhaling years of frustration as Obama put into words what they had always felt. Social media was already on fire, hashtags forming, clips being clipped, millions typing furiously. Obama just ended Trump. Trump stood there, visibly rattled, his smirk long gone. He had expected a sparring match, expected arrogance to carry him through as it always had. But arrogance had finally met its match, and lost. Obama straightened, his face calm again, his eyes fixed on the man beside him. The debate wasn't over, but the night already felt decided. But the true shockwaves weren't just in the room, they were about to explode across the world. The roar inside the debate hall hadn't even died down before the moment detonated online. Seconds after, Obama's counterattack, phones lit up like fireworks. Clips of his takedown raced across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, each one captioned with disbelief, admiration, and mockery aimed squarely at Trump. Within minutes, hashtags were trending worldwide. Obama mic drop, marriage matters, Trump shook. On TikTok, teenagers remixed Obama's calm delivery with dramatic sound effects, turning his lines into instant memes. Twitter flooded with reaction GIFs, Trump shifting uncomfortably at the podium, Obama's cool expression frozen like a movie poster. One viral meme split-screened the two men. Trump sweating under the lights, Obama standing tall with the caption, "Dignity versus desperation." Commentators, too, couldn't look away. CNN cut to a replay within moments, the anchors visibly stunned. "We've seen debate moments that live forever," one remarked, "but this one may eclipse them all." Obama just reframed the entire night. On MSNBC, Rachel Maddow called it a surgical strike of humor, morality, and leadership rolled into one. Even some conservative pundits looked shaken, struggling to spin Trump's unraveling. He got rattled, one admitted, fumbling for words. And then came the celebrities. Ava DuVernay tweeted, "This is why Obama was always 10 steps ahead. Calm, brilliant, unflappable." LeBron James chimed in with a simple mic emoji. Lin-Manuel Miranda posted a video of himself clapping slowly, dramatically, with the caption, "That's how you do it." The wave didn't stop there. Talk show hosts rushed to write their monologues around the exchange. Within hours, Jimmy Kimmel aired a side-by-side clip, joking, Trump tried to throw shade at Obama's marriage and ended up getting buried 6 feet under dignity. Memes flooded Facebook feeds, photoshopped posters reading Obama 1, Trump 0, or doctored images of Trump literally melting under the stage lights. But beyond the humor, there was a deeper resonance. The moment struck a nerve, especially with immigrants, young voters, and families watching at home. People saw their own struggles for dignity reflected in Obama's defense. Twitter threads popped up where couples shared photos of themselves, writing, "This is what real strength looks like." Parents commented that Obama's words about commitment echoed their own sacrifices. LGBTQ couples posted, "Love is love, and no bully can touch it." It wasn't just a comeback, it was a cultural lightning strike. Obama had turned what could have been a crude jab into a universal statement about respect and love. In doing so, he reclaimed the narrative of the debate entirely. The economy, healthcare, foreign policy, those would be discussed. But the defining moment, the clip that would be replayed for years, had already been decided. Inside the Trump campaign war room, aides scrambled. Reports leaked that Trump was furious, snapping at staff, demanding someone fix the coverage. But the story had spun out of their control. For once, it wasn't about Trump's noise, it was about Obama's clarity. The morning after, headlines captured the mood. Obama silences, Trump with marriage defense. A debate moment for the ages. Respect wins the night. On YouTube, reaction videos multiplied, each one capturing gasps, cheers, and teary-eyed viewers replaying the words that felt like both a defense of Michelle and a defense of something larger: family, community, dignity itself. And yet, amid the avalanche of memes and applause, something deeper lingered. This wasn't just about one man scoring a point on another. It wasn't even just about politics. It was about what kind of leadership resonated with people. When the stakes were personal, Obama's words had reminded the world that leadership wasn't about spectacle, it was about values. Trump's insult had been a weapon. Obama's response turned it into a mirror, reflecting Trump's weaknesses and magnifying them until the world could see them clearly. That's why the shockwaves lasted. That's why people kept replaying the moment. Because it wasn't just about humiliation. It was about vindication. And yet, the most powerful impact wasn't on Trump at all. It was on the millions watching at home. When the echoes of applause finally began to fade, the meaning of Obama's words lingered in the air like a steady heartbeat. What had started as a crude insult designed to belittle and embarrass had been transformed into something bigger. Something that transcended the stage and the politics of the moment. Obama hadn't just defended his marriage. He had defended the very idea that love, respect, and dignity are untouchable pillars of human life. In the days that followed, commentators noted that Obama could have lashed out in anger, could have matched insult with insult, cruelty with cruelty. But instead, he chose the higher ground, not in weakness, but in strength. By calmly affirming the sanctity of his partnership with Michelle, by reminding the world that true power lies not in tearing others down, but in lifting one's values up, he reframed the entire conversation. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. Marriage, after all, isn't just a personal vow. It is a reflection of commitment, sacrifice, and shared resilience. To mock that bond was to mock the quiet strength that holds families, communities, even nations together. Obama's response turned that attack into a parable. Bullies may sneer at love, but love cannot be diminished by their scorn. For millions watching at home, it wasn't just about Obama and Trump. It was about their own lives. Immigrant parents, who had endured ridicule and sacrifice, saw themselves in his steadiness. Young couples navigating prejudice found validation in his defense. People who had been told their identities, their relationships, or their values were less than worthy suddenly felt seen, honored, uplifted. Obama had spoken to them as much as he had spoken to Trump. The moral was clear. Arrogance crumbles, but dignity endures. When challenged, it is not the loudest voice that wins, but the truest. And in that hall, under the blinding lights, Obama showed that dignity is not just a shield, it is a sword, sharp enough to cut through mockery and expose it for what it is, weakness disguised as bravado. Trump's sneers would fade. The memes and laughter at his expense would pass. But the lesson, the reminder that leadership is defined not by insults, but by integrity, would outlast the noise. Obama's words offered something the country was desperately hungry for: reassurance. That amidst chaos, there remained voices willing to stand steady, voices willing to defend what actually matters. And so, when the clip replayed on living room televisions, when it was shared in WhatsApp groups across oceans, when it echoed in classrooms and union halls, it carried with it not just the drama of a debate, but the weight of a universal truth. Love and dignity always overpower hate and arrogance. Obama hadn't set out to deliver a sermon. He had simply defended what he cherished most. But in doing so, He reminded America of its own better self. He reminded the nation that real leadership isn't about dominance or applause. It's about clarity of values, about showing the courage to protect what is sacred, even when the whole world is watching. And so, a single sentence on live television became a reminder of what true leadership looks like. And there it was. In a single exchange, Obama didn't just dismantle Trump. He dismantled the very arrogance and cruelty Trump thought made him untouchable. The headlines would call it a political takedown, a debate highlight, a mic drop moment. But what really happened was deeper than that. Dignity destroyed arrogance. Respect silenced mockery. Love stood taller than hate. This wasn't just Obama's victory. It was all of ours. For every person who's ever been mocked for who they are, for what they love, or for where they come from, this moment was validation. A reminder that no matter how loud the insults, no matter how cruel the attacks, truth and dignity have a power that arrogance can never match. And that's why this story matters far beyond the stage. Because it's not just about politics, it's about who we are as people. Do we give in to the sneers, or do we rise above them? Do we let arrogance dominate, or do we defend the values that bind us together? Tonight, Obama showed what the answer should look like. If you felt that surge of pride watching him, if you believe dignity still matters in a world of noise, then you are part of this story too. Join this community, subscribe, comment, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that respect still wins. Your voice is just as important in keeping this movement alive. Because in the end, this isn't about one man against another. It's about us, standing together. And when we do, arrogance doesn't stand a chance.